Welcome, welcome. For those that are arriving, we're going to just wait a couple of moments as more people come into the Zoom, and we'll start shortly. Welcome, welcome. We will start in just a couple of moments as more people come into the Zoom. All right, thank you. Hello and welcome. I am Hafiza Rashid, the Senior Advisor, Communications and Outreach at the King Baudouin Foundation, United States. It's great to be here, and thank you so much for taking the time today to attend the final episode in our webinar series, the African Resource Mobilization webinar series. There are some familiar names in the attendee list, but for those who aren't familiar with KBF-US, please allow me a brief word. The King Baudouin Foundation, United States, facilitates thoughtful, effective giving to Europe and Africa. We enable U.S. donors to support their favorite causes overseas. We also provide European and African nonprofits with cost-effective solutions to raise funds in the United States through a tool we call an American Friends Fund. We have over 450 American Friends Funds, including the University of Nairobi, the Harare International Festival of Arts, and the Magna Yacub Heart Foundation, among many, many others. These funds save African nonprofits the trouble and expense of setting up their own U.S. public charity. KBF-US handles all back office administration, including tax receipts and donor support. So if you have donors in the US, feel free to reach out to me and we'll be happy to assist. And by the way, if you have donors in Canada, in Europe, or in Asia, feel free to reach out as well, as we have partners that can help you with donors in these countries and regions. My contact email will be made available following this webinar. There are a few additional points I'd like to make. All participants who have entered this webinar are in listen-only mode. This session is being recorded. Our moderator, Liz Ngonzi, will address questions at specific points of the discussion, but I encourage you use of the Q&A feature to submit questions throughout. Thank you.
Thank you, Hafiza. I've really enjoyed collaborating with you and the rest of the KBF-US team over the last few years to develop this, months, to develop this series together. Thank you so much for the opportunity to do so. Welcome everyone, and thank you for taking the time to learn with us. For those of you joining us again, we're very happy to have you with us again, and please feel free to share your questions in the Q&A. For those of you whom I've yet to meet, I'm the founder and CEO of the International Social Impact Institute, which I founded last year, recognizing that the unprecedented challenges currently facing the social impact sector highlighted the need for focused, creative, and well-networked change makers and social impact-driven leaders to help drive the sector forward. Through initiatives with KBF-US, Nelson Mandela University in South Africa, the Arcus Foundation in the US, and Hunter College and the City University of New York, as well as the Resource Alliance in the UK, the Institute aims to amplify the voices and the impact of social impact leaders from historically marginalized communities in the US and around the world, facilitate interactions among them, and assist in the training of more of them. I'm also an adjunct assistant professor of fundraising at New York University, teaching digital storytelling, innovation, and fundraising. The African Resource Mobilization webinar series is very special to me because it enables us to bring all together a lot of different stakeholders, including all of you and our incredible partners, Civicus Global Alliance, Candid, Equity Group Holdings, the Israel Family Foundation, the Kenya Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Nigeria Network of NGOs, and the Tri-State Area Africa Funders Network. I encourage you to learn about all of them as they support the social impact sector in many of the countries in which your organizations operate, offering research, educational content, networking opportunities, and of course, funding. In today's session, How to Attract Non-Traditional Funders, we will cover strategies and tactics to help you develop and scale a highly innovative organization using cutting-edge technology and cross-sector partnerships, and help you to attract and engage non-traditional funders, such as venture philanthropists and impact investors. I am so proud to welcome our distinguished panelists. The first panelist is Bill Rodriguez, who is a managing director of Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation, based in the US as well as Botswana, overseeing the foundation's international portfolio. In fact, he's joining us from Boston, where it's snowing today. He is a physician, entrepreneur, leader in global health, and a former Harvard Medical School faculty member, which is quite an incredible combination that enables him to effectively source new investments and work with the leadership of those organizations as an operating partner and board member as they grow to build capacity and to achieve their maximum impact. The DRK Foundation, as it is always known, was co-founded by William Draper III, a former administrator of the United Nations Development Program. It was his administration that introduced the groundbreaking Human Development Report that many of us working in the development field have undoubtedly referenced. Our second distinguished panelist is Gerald Abila, and he is a fellow Ugandan social entrepreneur whom I had the honor and pleasure of meeting in 2017, when he was awarded the KBF African Development Prize at the United Nations. He's an attorney and the founder and executive director of BarefootLaw, the first online legal service in East Africa, which is a free service that helps those who are most vulnerable to understand and defend their basic rights. 1 month ago, the Secretary of the Commonwealth presided over the launch of the second version of BarefootLaw's artificial intelligence-enabled platform, Winnie 2.0, which could allow them to begin to scale their services worldwide. I'll now ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Bill, please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Liz. Good morning and good afternoon to the participants. Thanks for having me here today. And thanks to FISA and the KBF US Foundation for putting on this incredible webinar series addressing such a critical topic, and for having been a great partner to DRK over the years. As Liz said, I'm a managing director at DRK. We look for and support early stage social enterprises that are trying to change the world in some way. We provide both financial support and non-financial support, as we'll talk about a little later. And personally, I'm a physician, as you heard. I'm based in Botswana. I chose the wrong day to come back and be in Boston in the cold. But most of the time, I'm living and working in Botswana and spending time on the continent.
Awesome. And you'll be able to share what early stage means for those who are not familiar with that concept. Thank you, Bill. Gerald, please go ahead.
Thank you, Hafiza, Liz, and Bill. It's a pleasure for me to be here with Bill because I learn something new each time we have a chance to speak. So I look forward to learning throughout our engagement today. Good morning, afternoon, and evening for all those who are joining us. My name is Gerald Dabila. I'm still a human being. I'm still a lawyer, and I'm still a social entrepreneur. I founded an organization called Barefoot Law, which is based in Uganda. And like Liz mentioned, was or is the pioneer legal tech social enterprise of its kind in Africa. And for that, we won the King Baudouin African Development Prize that Liz referred to earlier on. Through the use of technology and innovation, Barefoot Law empowers people to develop legal solutions to their problems so they can protect themselves, they can protect their communities, and hopefully the communities will thrive as a result. I'm glad to be here and I very much look forward to this engagement. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, let's jump right in. I know that the audience has tons of questions for us. I've seen them really very active on social media, but let's just go ahead and start with our questions and we'll intersperse some of them as well as someone's going to share a link to a bunch of resources we put together for all of you. All right, so let's talk. Many of the participants in this webinar work with nonprofit organizations that are funded by traditional funders, such as foundations, governments, corporations, and philanthropists, many of which we have discussed earlier during earlier webinars in the series. Gerald, could you please explain what it means to say that Barefoot Law is a social enterprise rather than a more traditional nonprofit organization? And could you share with us the differences and similarities between the two in terms of business models, funding sources, and potential impact? Bill, I'm going to ask you a question to follow on from there after that.
Thank you, Liz. I guess there is no one single definition of what a social enterprise is, but my understanding of a social enterprise is an organization whose primary mission is driven by making a bigger positive change within society, at least societies in which they operate. And this can be both for profit and non-profit. For instance, a solar selling company or a company that is dealing in the selling of solar products, small scale units that are sold in kiosks to kiosk owners or low-income households. Their aim eventually is to provide light to improve on people's quality of life, but not primarily to earn revenue. On the other hand, you'll have a company that's still dealing in solar products, but primarily to make a profit or primarily for revenue. I guess that vision and that goal for me is where the biggest difference is. Many nonprofits can be considered social enterprises in that they exist to provide a social service as their primary goal, but the opposite is not necessarily true. Not all for-profits can be considered social enterprises. There's also the technicality of the overall goal. I would think social enterprises have as their overall goal, of course, like I mentioned, their primary mission is social transformation, while non-social enterprises, the primary mission is revenue generation, usually for shareholders or investors. But again, I guess the difference depends on where one comes from or the country in which one operates, because these differences, and in some countries, in fact, the definition of social enterprise is by law. There's a law that defines what a social enterprise is. For countries like Uganda, a social enterprise can take different formats. It could be an NGO, it could be a company limited by guarantee. In some other countries, a social enterprise could be registered as a hybrid organization. So I guess it depends broadly on whether there is a specific law to define the scope of what a social enterprise is. But if not, then we can define it based on what the overall goal of the entity is. And Barefoot Law is an example of what a social enterprise is, at least according to Uganda's laws. And now I'm speaking like a lawyer, which I usually don't like doing.
It just depends, right?
Yeah, it depends.
Okay, great. Bill, thank you for that. Bill, could you please share a bit about the funding spectrum to provide us with some context, and then tell us about a bit about DRK Foundation and how it fits into this ecosystem and what it offers to founders in terms of financial and non-financial support.
Great, thanks, Liz. Yeah, just to amplify on what Gerald said, I think the simplest definition that we think about is are they mission driven? Are enterprises mission driven? And if it's a mission driven organization, from DRK's perspective, we're agnostic as to the business model. It could be set up as a nonprofit, a traditional nonprofit. It could be set up as a hybrid that has a large earned revenue stream. It could be a traditional for-profit enterprise that's really driven by its mission, in addition to trying to have sustainable revenues. So when you think about funders like us, we tend to bridge the gap, I think, between traditional funders as a foundation in the US and non-traditional funders, because we operate a little differently, and I'll get to that in a second. I think when you think of then social enterprises that are mission driven, it opens up the universe of funding much broader than the traditional foundations and government agencies that fund those mission driven organizations in different sectors. The biggest change we've seen over the past, I would say 10 or 15 years are two. One is the number of family offices. So small foundations that are run by families that have decided to focus on some charitable activity, usually in a particular area, whether it's geographically in East Africa or in agriculture or in social justice. And those family offices really have an enormous amount of capital that they want to deploy to mission-driven organizations. So we've seen that as a big shift in the past 15 or 20 years. And more of the organizations we see are getting a lot of support at the early stage from those family offices. And then the second is a lot of organizations in the past 10 to 15 years have embraced a for-profit model. And it can sometimes be challenging to balance the mission and the profit opportunity and the need to have a sustainable revenue model and business model. But it also opens up the funding sources to the so-called impact investors who are looking to balance those two things and deploy the money that they use to see some change in the world, some positive change in the world. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that and there'll be more questions about that. Where DRK sits, we're pretty unusual. DRK, as Liz mentioned, Bill Draper had two careers. He's 93 years old. He's still the chairman of our board. He's still very active, but he was one of the first venture capitalists in Silicon Valley in the early 1960s, in the early days of venture capital, and then later went to UNDP and became critical in thinking about human development at UNDP. So DRK was founded linking those two principles, which is we can apply the model of venture capital to impact. So instead of looking at profit as the goal of organizations we support, we look at impact as the goal, but we otherwise take a very similar view to what is it that helps an early stage enterprise overcome the challenges of growing into a significant and sustainable and successful organization. So at DRK, I'll just say two things. One is we look for early stage enterprises that are mission driven. And what we mean by early stage is what we would refer to as post-pilot and pre-scale. So there's some evidence that their model, their business, their service, their product, whatever it is they do that they think is important for making the world a different place and a better place, that it has some traction, either traction in one geography, in one market segment, in one group of clients or beneficiaries, but they haven't yet begun to scale it. So that's for us what early stage means. It's not so much about their budget or their size. It's have they demonstrated that what they can do has the potential to change the world, but it's not quite there yet. And the reason we look for that is we think we've learned over the years, what are the critical dimensions that help those organizations overcome the valley of death in fundraising, the challenges of building out a team, of hiring well, of figuring out your long-term financial model. And so DRK comes in with three kinds of support. One is financial. We provide $300,000 of unrestricted capital. We don't believe in Gerald.
Can you say that again?
$300,000 of unrestricted capital.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. It's very important for people to know that.
Yeah, and the key thing is unrestricted. You know, it's hard sometimes to find unrestricted capital, and we recognize that. We also do two other things, and Gerald can speak to this, and will probably confirm, I think, that the $300,000 was nice, for sure, but that wasn't what DRK brings to the table. The other two things we bring are intensive support for our portfolio. We actually promise them that they'll never get another dime from us. And that changes the nature of the relationship. We're not seen as a funder now, but a partner. And we dive in, Gerald and I speak weekly, I don't know, sometimes daily. And we're there to help the entrepreneur address the challenges of growing an organization. And we have 6 dimensions we think through, which we can talk about, that we see as critical to scaling an impact-driven organization. And we focus on that.
Go ahead and share.
Yeah, those 6 dimensions are leadership. So how do you develop the leadership skills of the senior team and the leader? Organizational development, hiring, HR practices, policies. How do you build a culture and a team that can drive your mission? Board development, we find that boards are critical to successful growing organizations that deliver impact. Fundraising strategy, how do you establish a strategy to attract funders, traditional and non-traditional, as you grow? Financial management, and then your scaling strategy. What is your long-term vision of success and how do you get there? What's your strategy for reaching that? So we focus with intensive support in each of those 6 areas over a 3-year period. And then the last thing that we do is we've been doing this for almost 20 years, and we've funded about 184 organizations to date. And that means we have a big network of entrepreneurs who are all doing exactly the same thing in different sectors. And that becomes an incredible network to share ideas, learnings, relationships, networks. And we bring a number of co-funders and co-investors, including KBF, who we can make introductions to. And so it's a big ecosystem of support that eventually is part of our DRK family. And we bring that into the equation very early on with organizations that we fund. And it's those last two things, that network and that intentional support across 6 dimensions, that we believe is more valuable than the $300,000. Not that it's nothing, but it's that additional non-financial support.
Very key, very key. And you look at it from a you look at it sort of 10 years out, right? Like a 10-year time horizon is the relationship.
Yeah, exactly. We because we focused on such early stage organizations, we try to envision with them. We have, tell us, what do you think this looks like in 10 years?
Right.
How do you achieve that grand vision? Our direct intensive support is only for 3 years, but we stay connected over that 10-year journey and try to help reach that ambitious goal that gets set early on as our 10-year vision.
That's incredible. I want to piggyback off of that a bit. And in our earlier sessions in the series, we learned that funders' interest is typically driven by the founder first, and only then by the organization and its potential impact. And you've kind of spoken a little bit about that. Can you share what DRK looks for in a founder?
Yeah.
And what it's found in those 184 founders in which it's invested? And yeah, that's really kind of what we're looking to find out.
The K in DRK is Rob Kaplan, and Rob Kaplan he's had a long career, including time at Harvard Business School, where he taught about leadership and entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And he actually studied this question of what makes a strong leader of a mission-driven organization. And the number one characteristic of successful leaders is intellectual curiosity. Are they active learners? Do they try to improve themselves and learn as much as they can? So that's the number one thing we look for, and we found that plays out and has borne out in our portfolio. The second is what we would call coachability, which those two are linked. Are they willing and able to take advice? And that turns out to be critical to our model because we're so heavily involved in offering support and advice. And resistance to that makes it difficult for us. So we look for that specifically. The third is passion, and I think most entrepreneurs are passionate about what they do, but it's important for us to make sure we understand where that passion comes from. The next is proximity. Do they understand the problem they're trying to solve from their own personal proximity and experience with it? And Gerald obviously exemplifies that and is typical of our portfolio. And then the last thing I would say is, one of the personal traits that we tend to find to be really successful with our model is this unusual but important combination of confidence but humility. Like to be willing to say, I don't know everything, and be humble about it, but I'm confident in what I do know, and I'm confident that I can learn. And that tends to be a really attractive combination of characteristics in an entrepreneur. So that's really our list. Yeah. And
do they have to be a certain age? Like, because I think we have quite a range of folks.
Our youngest entrepreneur was 22 and our oldest was 73, I think. So nope, we have a broad.
73?
Yeah, we had a 73-year-old entrepreneur who.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So no age requirement at all, and there's no sector requirement on our side either. So we're open to everything.
Okay, all right, that's great. Gerald, I have a question for you. Can you share the path that led you to connecting with DRK Foundation, how you applied for the support, and what it is about your package that seemed to resonated with them the most, and what is the nature of your relationship with them? I know that you're constantly speaking and so on and so forth, but I really want to understand that, and most importantly, how you maintain that relationship, because I think it's important for folks to understand. A lot of times, we in the nonprofit space, we think, okay, we just got to get the funds, right? And then it's over. But there's a relationship that you really need to maintain and need to understand it's a partnership and a relationship. So I just want to hear from you in your own words what that looks like for you.
Thank you, Liz. Just one other thing to what Bill mentioned. A lot of times people invest in the horse. People bet on the horse. And the DRK, in a way, bets on the horse rider and the horse, and they realize that combination is what is necessary for a win. So, and the qualities that Bill mentioned, I was typing, because, like I said, there's always something to learn. The DRK is a great organization, but truth be told, I did not know about the DRK until they approached us as a possible fit. And that was back in 2017. The DRK is not your traditional organization through which you apply. You're invited to make an application. by 2017, Barefoot Law was driven a lot by passion, driven by our mission to make the law readily available all across Uganda and then all across Africa. When the DRK approached us, like I said, I'd never heard of them. And I was a bit hesitant because what they were offering seemed too good to be true. And it took a lot of discussion for us internally to consider the DRK, because over time we were going down the traditional way of resource mobilization, especially in I would say maybe in sub-Saharan Africa. We sat down and wrote proposals almost every day, every week. Anyone who is this path, we wrote proposals, hoping that the funding would get from traditional funders through proposal writing is what we would use for R&D. But unfortunately, at that time, the organization and the idea was too radical. And many times all these were rejected. In the meantime, the DRK is knocking. We're carrying out further research. And now, if you put yourself in our minds, or at least in our position, by then we had barely had revenues in total for the years we had been operating. In total, I would say the revenues were less than 50,000 over about 4 or 5 years.
Is that 50,000 shillings or dollars?
$50,000.
You know, shillings,
combined.
That's nothing.
Sorry, yeah, in shillings, that's nothing. But in terms of dollars, for about 5 years on average, it was really small, and we had been operating for the first 2 or 3 years on about $1,000 and goodwill. We did not apply to the DRK. There was no application process. They saw something in us, which even ourselves we had not seen, and thought maybe in 3 years and longer, there is a potential to convert this organization to something that would really have an impact, not only in Uganda, but probably across the region. In the end, and in fact, this also included when the DRK invited us to submit an application, a due diligence process was carried out. The team came over to Uganda, met with Barefoot Law, and carried out a verification. And I don't know, it's a conversation I'm yet to have with Bill, but I think we were far. It was, by that time, Barefoot Law was passion and an idea and nothing internal. Very few structures. Of course, there are documents we put together, thinking if you have the document, you will follow it, but these were not really organic. In the end, we were very successful with the DRK. And I remember when the agreement was sent, it was only about a 1-page agreement with targets. It was sent online for us to sign.
Yeah.
The agreements were used to about 20 or 30. Our MOU alone for partners was about 30 pages.
Because you're lawyers.
You're lawyers, exactly.
I'm a lawyer.
Liz, let me jump in with just a few points there, because I think there's some critical things that Gerald mentioned that are worth highlighting for everyone.
Sure.
One is just a clarification. So at DRK, we have an open application process. Anyone can apply at any time.
You hear that?
Yeah, anyone can apply.
Everybody? Okay.
All year round. We'll look at anyone, and you don't need to be invited. So for Gerald, we had to pursue him because we had heard about Barefoot Law, and he was clearly skeptical. And I think that's one of the important points to make, in addition to the fact that we're open to everyone. You know, some funders put a lot of restrictions on what you can do with their money. And it's understandable. Some of them, it's because of their charter. They have no choice about it. Others, they just have a very narrow area of focus. But it can make it hard on early stage organizations, because what early stage organizations need is unrestricted funding. Yeah. And I think Gerald's experience before a few organizations, including KBF and the prize that he received, and Echoing Green, which I think also was a big early supporter, as well as DRK, we were focused on what can we do to make you succeed, which we know includes unrestricted funding. But he hadn't had that experience, I think, with a lot of funders. So for everyone in the audience and the participants, I would say, when you're looking at your early stage support, it can be hard, but try to spend time finding aligned funders who are invested in your success and want to provide unrestricted support. Because if you get too boxed in too quickly, and we've seen it with several organizations, it can be really hard then to open up what you can do and see your own potential for what it really is. And that was critical, I think, for Gerald and when we came in, and a few other funders at the time.
Okay, awesome. Awesome.
Thanks, Bill. You reminded me of the Lil Wayne quote. I'll just, opportunity came knocking at the front door and we almost ran out through the back. But the best thing to happen to Barefoot Law, with hindsight, was the DRK. At least in the past 3 years, we wouldn't be the organization we are. And in fact, we look back at that experience and just laugh. Because for us, it was the first time we were looking at it was one of our first exposures to a non-traditional funder. We were not used to it.
Right.
And that enabled us to become the organization we are today. And the greatest support the DRK has provided, like Bill mentioned, beyond the finance, was everything almost. The organization, the connections to experts, as well as to portfolio organizations that, like Bill said, are in the same area of growth and share the same sort of ideas. That has been invaluable, as well as opening doors to other non-traditional funders.
Okay, fantastic. So I have a question for you, Gerald, from Uganda. It's from Rehema Kasule, who is a fellow social entrepreneur, actually she's a great woman. Gerald, I have read about your inspiring story. This is a true testimony that Africans can shrink big challenges into bold and innovative African solutions. Looking at Africa's demographics, in your opinion, share 2 to 3 strategies that youth in Africa should take to change the narrative and galvanize efforts to decolonize their mindsets to see themselves as leaders of today and take action towards job creation, active citizenship, and championing of systemic changes in their countries.
I guess Bill already provided a very good place to start in what the DRK looks for in individuals. I feel youth need to be intellectually curious. That will always try to push the boundary. They should be open to learning, what Bill mentioned as coachability. That is learn, unlearn, and relearn. And know sometimes you fail, sometimes you succeed. Be passionate about what you do. Be proximate to the issue and be confident, but have a lot of humility. But then again, and I know this is bold coming from me, youth in Africa, I feel a lot of times limit their mindsets to Africa has a scope. Not only youth, but a lot of people across Africa. The solutions we develop should be solutions that are going to challenge the world or to solve problems around the world, not only problems in your community, not problems in Africa only. So I think the youth should understand they are on a global stage. The world is more connected now than ever, and start thinking of making breakthroughs globally. Don't limit your scope of thought only to Africa. Be ready to challenge the world and be bold about it.
Love it. Because according to the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, you're going global.
Yeah.
I heard that during your launch.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's something we'll pursue seriously.
Absolutely. So I have a question again from Bill. This is for you. It's from James Odede. He says, is there a chance one can tick all of the boxes of qualities you mentioned you're looking for on a founder and still not get funding?
I was actually just typing an answer to James while you were speaking.
Okay, great.
I'll say what I was typing. So the answer is yes, of course. It's not just about the entrepreneur. So we want to see those qualities, but we also need to understand the organization's mission, the potential for growth, the kind of impact it sees for itself, the challenges ahead of it. So those are critical, but not the only thing we look at. And okay. That's what I was about to type to James.
Okay. All right, and then let me just add on to that. This is Rosemary Mutunke from Kenya. She says, from the 6 areas you focus on, what are the 2 areas that most organizations have the biggest gap?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. So let me just tick them off again. So leadership, organizational development, board and board development, financial management, fundraising strategy, and scaling strategy. And typically when we come in, the leader is passionate and clear and has those qualities, and there's a clear scaling plan or reasonably clear plan of the kind of impact that they're trying to see in the world. So those two tend to be in pretty good shape. What's often less developed is the board. The boards of early stage mission-driven organizations we find are generally supported by friends and family and people around the entrepreneur, which is a great way to start, but often there's a much bigger role the board can play, and that's an area we spend a lot of time focusing on. The next I would say is in financial management. A lot of the tools are rudimentary, and people are not sure how to build out the right approach to managing finances and planning for future growth. So we spend a time on financial management. And then the last is on organizational development and identifying your staffing plan, your talent needs, where you're going to bring in senior management, when you're going to bring those people in, how you're going to onboard them. So that's probably the third significant area where we see a gap. And it's different in every organization and in different parts of the world. There's different trends that we see, but I would say those are the three ones that are generally the least well-developed are the board, financial management, and planning for growth with hiring key staff.
Okay. Awesome. One really quick question before I continue with mine. This is from Andrew Foose, I believe. Does DRK expect a return on its investment?
We could spend a whole hour on that question. The short answer is, so our funding initially came from Bill Draper and Robert Richards, and now we raise money from donors. So we're a venture philanthropy. We're a charity under the way we're set up. So we don't have.
So you're a 501c3.
We're an operating foundation, essentially for like a 501c3.
Yeah.
So we actually have some restrictions on investing in for-profits, but we don't have an expectation on ROI in for-profits. That said, one of our critical roles is we understand that you need to attract investors who do have an ROI expectation. Right. And we want to make sure that we understand that plan and we contribute to that plan. So we spend some time talking through how you see that, even though our own portfolio investment doesn't actually have that expectation. But we understand that needs to be present, and we need to understand your way of thinking about your own return on investment.
Okay. All right. So that was great. I'm going to go back to my questions. I've got my texts are blowing up, but I want to cover an area that we sort of had agreed we're going to do. So this is around collaboration, which I know the two of you know is really, really important. And, in this series, we've spoken with various organizational leaders in the US and across the African continent who've told us about the importance of collaboration for leaders and organization success. I want to hear let's hear from Bill first. Bill, can you speak to how our audience members might potentially develop mutually beneficial relationships, and I emphasize mutually beneficial, with others in the social impact ecosystem? And what are some practical steps one can take to develop such relationships? And then Gerald, what I'd like you to then address are, what are some of the relationships that have enabled you to grow Barefoot Law from a relatively small legal aid organization to an innovative organization with potential to scale globally?
Yeah, I'll talk about three different kinds of groups that you can form relationships with, and maybe some strategies on how to do that. So the first is funders. As Liz said in the resource guide that KBF US will share with you, we added some of the thoughts that come from our fundraising specialist, Emily Edwards. So you'll see some resources there about how we think about building your relationship with funders. One of her maxims, one of her sayings is, two good sayings. One is, if you ask for money, you'll get advice. And if you ask for advice, you'll get money. So what's really important with funders is to understand, what is the funder interested in? What drives their funding? And how can I learn more about what they're interested in? Because if I'm going to have them as a funder, I don't want it to be like a banking relationship with my banker. I want them to understand what we do, and so I should understand what they do. So learn about them, ask questions, ask for advice, ask what they think of your model, ask what they're interested in, who else should you be talking to? And in our experience, the more advice you ask for from a funder, the more likely they are to fund you. And it's not about the money for them. It's about they want to get to know you and your work. And so you should want to get to know them and their work. The second saying she has is, you have to say thank you 7 times before you'll get funding, which is, a cute saying, but it has some truth to it. So practice saying thank you for all that advice that they're giving you. And then ultimately they're likely to be a strong supporter. So that's So that's one, is just introduce yourself to funders, learn about them by reading up on them and then asking them questions. That's the key thing. Second is with other entrepreneurs. Make it a point to introduce yourself to another entrepreneur in your field once a month and just ask them, like, how have you handled this problem? You'll build that network and you'll get a lot of good advice on how to avoid disasters, whether it's a people disaster or a financial disaster. Just build your own network by just saying, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm doing something similar, but I'm doing it in this sector in this country. So just make it a point to schedule that once a month. Find someone new to meet. And then third is with partners. You're going to go further in your mission by partnering. And so identify aligned organizations that see the world the way you do and maybe bring something else to the table. And those relationships, again, are cemented by understanding what they do and seeing how you can work together to make both parties, succeed more. So those are just some quick points, but I do think it's critical as a leader to really build your relationships through those three different networks.
Awesome. Thank you. Gerald?
Thank you, Liz. Maybe just to add on what Bila said, something else that's really important is communication. Personally, I had challenges communicating because I'm usually an introvert. So one of the first things I learned from Bill and yep.
Really? I never would have guessed that.
The current persona can be a bit deceptive.
Okay.
But so I was a lot quiet, and I would really not pursue. And of course, coming from Uganda, where politeness is key, something I really had to learn, or something I was taught from our engagement with the DRK in the early stages, was communication. So I think communication, like Bill said, with partners, with friends, with people in a similar sector as you are, is really important. And that communication is both verbal as well as in how you present yourself. Directly to your question, by relationships, I guess you mean partnerships as well. For us, at least from my perspective, one of the most important relationships has been with the team at BarefootLaw, my colleagues and the board. We started off with this team from a position where we did not have even lunch at office. The usual early stage hustle.
Yeah.
So I think just having that relationship is something I really appreciate. Of course, the next is from family and friends. And this is especially in the very early stage, the first 2 to 3 years. For some, there's a church as well, family, friends, and churches.
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of prayer.
There's a lot of prayer and a lot of connections as well. For us, family and friends, and that's around the time when you have a family and friends board, especially in the very beginning. They're parents of friends who used to come to office, or parents of colleagues to offer support to BarefootLaw, reviewing documents just to make sure the organization grows. The other important relationship has been from our partners, those who have funded us and those who have not funded us, at least a non-funded partnership, those who believed in the idea. I can't put a cost to it because it has really been invaluable, but it's one of the most important relationships we have as well.
And it sounds like so let me ask you, because I know you won the KBF US African Development Prize. I can imagine that was really transformative for your organization as well.
Yes, it was. In fact, it's an interesting story because we received that email from the KBF on the day we received the rejection for something we had been pursuing for 2 years.
That's how life works sometimes.
That's how life works. Yeah, I remember it was, I think, on 22nd or 23rd of December.
Yeah.
Right before we broke off for Christmas. And one partner, it didn't work out. So we're at a board meeting in a very tiny office, our old office, trying to figure out next steps. Because honestly, we were not going on up to Jan. And just then, in that meeting, an email arrives from the KBF, you've won. And yeah, it really opened a number of doors, and I would consider that a miracle as well.
Yeah, but, I mean, because I thought it was huge. I mean, I went to that event; it was quite impressive.
It was huge because
it was huge. It was a huge deal.
It was such a huge deal because one, it validated our model, especially for the BarefootLaw team.
Right.
It sort of showed there's potential in what we are doing.
Right.
And now we just need to keep doing it even better. And then it opened doors and generated a lot of interest.
And I'm sure that's how one of the ways Bill may have heard about you, right? So I'm not trying to lead it, but I'm kind of putting all the pieces together in the background.
And
okay.
yeah, just one other thing is the KBF came with a lot of exposure, but that was before the DRK. So internally as Barefoot Law, we were not very able to harness that level of exposure.
Okay.
But now with the exercises we've done with partners like the DRK, I believe it's really different. And that's part of the value of a non-traditional funders. In addition to the funding you get, there's a lot of infrastructure or internal support to enable you benefit even more from such exposures.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Okay, so let me read a couple of questions from the audience, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Winnie 2.0. You know, I'm loving Winnie 2.0, Gerald. Okay, this question comes from Maurice Amondi, who is the chairman of the Kenya Association of Fundraising Professionals, one of our partners, great partners. He says, philanthropy is often viewed as charity. How can it be transformed to bring social transformation? Is social entrepreneurship compatible with philanthropy?
I'll try to take that on. That's a good question. I'll just say, and I know this is being recorded, but I'm okay with that. There's a lot that's broken. A lot is broken in the philanthropy model, a lot. And so, charity is not it's not a model that I think a lot of people think is a win for many different parts of, the world and many different sectors. So I think what's been most exciting in the philanthropic sector recently is the understanding that social enterprises can change the world. And rather than forcing them to adjust to the philanthropic model, we need to adjust to social enterprises and what they're doing. And that's forced a lot of philanthropies to change what they do, be more dynamic, provide more unrestricted funding, which is still hard, but it's actually growing as a percentage of funding. To focus on providing non-financial support and requiring shorter and shorter documentation and less reporting. So I think it's not there yet. There's a lot that needs to be fixed, and it's still, highly colonial in a lot of ways.
Yes, it is.
So I see that there's been progress. I would say where, it's very early in transforming philanthropy, but at least people are a little more self-aware on the philanthropic side of the table that there's a lot of problems with how they've approached funding good work in the past.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you on that. So let's just jump into Winnie 2.0 so you can tell us a little bit about it. And as I said earlier, I recently had the honor, I guess it's about a month ago now, because it was the 17th of March. I recently had the honor of witnessing the launch of ceremony for Winnie 2.0, which your team expertly managed across 3 continents in the face of terribly stormy weather in Kampala. Wow. Please tell us a little bit about Winnie 2.0 and the partners with whom you've developed this innovative platform and your vision for its future impact. And then Bill, if you'll be able to kind of jump in and talk about what attracted you to the Winnie project, what kind of support you and your team have provided to Gerald and his team throughout the development of this project. And then also we want to hear a little bit about some of your non-tech driven innovations, some of more of the traditional organizations that you fund, because I don't want people to think that all we're doing here is tech. So.
Yeah, Winnie was one of the first beneficiaries that Barefoot Law had a chance to help. And this was in about 2013, 2014. And the story touched us so much. Around that time, we were thinking of developing an artificial lawyer. And the name Winnie sort of popped up naturally. Oh, so it great. Was, in fact, there's a story, Winnie, from a beneficiary to a lawyer, to an e-lawyer. That's the inspiration behind the name Winnie. I believe there exists in the world right now all the technology necessary for us to make the law available to everyone today, way before 2030. Our only limitation is human
Gerald, maybe turn off your video.
Hi, I seem to have lost you for a bit.
Okay, yeah, you said the only difference, and that was it.
Our limitation is human ingenuity and creativity in getting this technology to resolve this access to justice challenge. In this light, for us at Barefoot Law, we believe by 2030 is important for us because that's when the world sits again to review the development goals. One of these goals is SDG 16, under which access to justice for all falls. We believe that by 2030, we will have an AI lawyer system that will be providing legal help to our users to a level of accuracy equal to a human lawyer or more accurate than a human lawyer. And
you're coming after the lawyers. Are you looking to replace yourself?
No. Lawyers will need to, there are more opportunities in this new way of doing things than they are. It's like emails and how they created a lot of easiness serving court documents.
Yeah.
After creating Winnie, we intend to deploy her across Africa and across the world, hopefully. So we envision a world in which a person will be able to go to a rural community somewhere without a lawyer present and be able to get legal help from an autonomous system by 2030 in a language of their choice. That's our grand vision. We are now on version 2, the version that you witnessed the launch by Patricia Scotland, the Secretary General of the Commonwealth.
And we saw a sneak peek this morning.
In the stormy weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you saw a sneak peek this morning, which was good because that sneak peek showed it a bit, the accuracy has really improved. Totally. This version was developed in partnership with Imperial Business School in London and several consultants over time. And for us, why we do it is we believe that if we get Winnie across Africa, it will enable us to reach 50 million people by 2030, provide them with legal advice and guidance. And we believe 50 million is significant because we think it will create a tipping point that will enable a significant proportion of the continent to start resolving their disputes lawfully, which will help to create a bit of less conflict. So it's something that we're driving towards, and hopefully it will work. And that's our mission.
Yeah.
To get land to protect using technology.
Land disputes, inheritance, all the big ones, right?
Yeah, and just to clarify, Winnie is not a chatbot. It's a system that tries to provide legal guidance as much as a human being lawyer would across the board. So it's not FAQs, it's land, inheritance, it could be company registration, it could be criminal matters all across the board. And that's where the challenge is. In law, we call it, we're focusing on substantive law as opposed to procedural law.
Right.
And that's why it's a bit more of a challenge.
Okay, great. And Bill, you want to?
Yeah, just to add, I think, and I'll step back in time a little bit. When we met Gerald, they were just completing their technology platform, which pulls incoming requests in from social media, from Facebook, through SMS, from voice calls. And we're creating a technology platform that enabled them to really reach out further and deliver their services. And what was great about that when we joined was they saw technology as a tool, a critical tool to close the gap, right? People out there need services. They have a team that can provide those services, but there's such poor access, and technology enabled them to close that gap. And Winnie is just the next generation of that, in my view. It's an incredibly insightful idea that we can apply advanced artificial intelligence technology to close the gap between rural people in Uganda and lawyers willing to help them. And it's just been a phenomenally impressive project to see its development over the past year and a half, bringing in some global experts in artificial intelligence and having them think about the challenge of providing legal support to rural Ugandans and ultimately more people across Africa. So it's the right, in our view, it's the right way to think about technology. it's a tool you use to solve the problem you're trying to solve with your model. It's not a model in and of itself.
Right. Absolutely. And how about some of your non-tech sort of oriented investments? Can you tell us a little bit about them?
For us, on our side?
Yeah, on your side.
Oh, sure. I mean, we've done a lot of investment in agriculture. So 1 Acre Fund, you know, and others that are providing inputs to farmers that really do not rely on technology. We've had a strong focus on community health worker-based organizations that see community health workers as closing that gap for health services in communities. So we fund Last Mile Health, Muso, Living Goods, a bunch of organizations that have really helped deliver community-based healthcare. In education, there's a lot of focus on teacher training. We have a bunch of activities in protecting children from violence and sexual assault that are really not tech enabled. So there's a lot of different ways to bridge the gap between people who have a need and a service model that can meet that need.
Okay. Awesome. Wow, we have 5 minutes left. So I'm trying to figure, I've got to wrap up, but I've got all these questions coming through. Rosemary even has another question, but Rosemary, you already asked yours, so I'm
furiously typing some questions.
Okay, you're typing. So did you write to Chatty?
No, I did not.
Okay, so Chatty says, what do you see as the biggest challenges for organizations seeking funding generally, but specifically unrestricted funding from funders such as DRK and others?
Yeah, 2 things I would say. One is, well, the biggest challenge is access, like finding them. But once you find them, and that can be hard, but that's where you have to tap into KBF and your networks. You know, once you find them, the 2 challenges are, one is just asking for money, right? Which I said before. Understand what the funders are looking for and figure out if there's a fit and help them understand what you do while you learn what they do. Like, so the challenge is to expect that once you've met someone who seems interested in what you do, you should just ask them for money. It's not mostly what funders are interested in. And then 2 is, as Emily Edwards would say, is you have to see fundraising as a science, not an art. And the science part is be rigorous in how you respond, when you respond, the timeliness of your response, providing information. Make it a priority to be focused on responsiveness to what they're asking for. And if they see that relationship is important to you, then you'll become important to them. Those are the 2 biggest mistakes I see, is they think once you've met a funder who funds the kind of work you do, then all the work is done. That's actually just the start of the relationship, especially if you want it to be a long-term committed funding relationship.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. I need to wrap up now, but if you guys are willing to stay, I think Bill, you have a hard stop, but Gerald, I'd like to ask you some of the questions that came in through my chat after this, but let me go ahead and wrap up for everyone who needs to get off at 10, and then we'll continue. So let me go ahead, but this has been amazing. I could speak with both of you all day long. I wish I could, but I, really just thank you both so tremendously for sharing your knowledge and your time and everything that you do in this world. And of course, I want to thank everyone who joined us today. As you may know, this is the final webinar in the 5-part African Resource Mobilization webinar series. If you've not watched them all, I hope you consider doing so, and we'll be sharing the links for you to do so. I think you'll find that there's several common threads woven throughout the series. I'd like to highlight 4 of those themes, which I hope will inspire and activate you as you work to transform your communities. The first is the importance of getting clear about your own story and then making every effort to communicate it. You must differentiate yourself and your organization and develop a unique and compelling value proposition for your prospective funders and other partners. The second is recognizing the importance of building long-term and mutually beneficial relationships. As the African proverb states, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. The third is the importance of researching potential sources of financial support, as well as non-monetary honors and awards, and then moving past your own limiting beliefs and applying for those that make sense for you, even if you may not take every single box on the list of preferred qualifications. Finally, a 4th key theme has been that grit is what leads to success. That means that if you do not succeed the first time, you must try again and again until you do. As I conclude these remarks, I want to thank all of our partners once again for really stepping up and helping us to reach several of our speakers and all of our audience members. I would also like to thank King Baudouin Foundation US, led by Jean-Paul Warmos, who had the vision for this series, and of course, Hafiza, who really led this effort and was a terrific thought partner. I want to thank Faircom for all of their efforts to ensure a seamless virtual experience, and of course, my team at the International Social Impact Institute that includes Stuart Kane and Coco Kwaku. Before I hand it over to Hafiza, I also want to pay tribute to the late, great Naomi Levine. She was the founder and former executive director of the New York University Hyman Center for Philanthropy and Fundraising, which pioneered the education of fundraisers. Naomi was sometimes referred to as the billion-dollar woman because she raised several billions of dollars for New York University over a 22-year period starting in 1979 as their senior vice president of external relations. She took over those funding responsibilities when the university was in a financially precarious state. And by the time she retired, the university was raising $300 million per year and is raising about $700 million now. She hired me in 2009 to begin teaching in the Hyman Center, where I've now spent 12 years teaching fundraising professionals. She was formerly the lead speaker at KBF US's annual Art and Science of Fundraising conferences. When she stepped down from that role, she recommended me to Jean-Paul as her successor, making it possible for my own collaboration with KBF US to take shape. Yesterday would have been her 98th birthday, but she passed away, sadly, in December, shortly after completing her last book, and she even wrote one the year before. We will share the link to her inspiring New York Times obituary in the chat, and I encourage you all to read it. But I want to leave you with some words from her as we wrap up the series of conversations on the art and science of fundraising that I hope will help you on your journey to make the world a better place. She wrote in her book, From Bankruptcy to Billions, fundraising is not primarily asking people for money. It is the cultivation of people. It is developing relationships. Here's where the art, not science, comes in. Here's where your personality and how you relate to people is key. Every situation is different as every donor, and fundraisers need to be able to be adaptable. Thank you so very much for joining us. Hafiza, please close us out.
Hello, everyone. My video will start in a moment. Thank you. Thank you so much, especially for that remembrance to Naomi Levine. She was incredible. And a special thank you to you, Liz Ngonzi, for moderating today's conversation and your stewardship of this incredible series. And also much gratitude to Bill and Gerald for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you. Okay, so.
Oh, I have a few more remarks.
Okay. We're not over, it's not over yet.
Yes, I just want to let you know that I hope all of you found this conversation interesting, but most importantly, useful for you and your organizations. Following this conversation, we will send you a link for the full webinar series, along with a link that includes the recorded webinar series and resource sheets that have been made available, and a brief survey. The survey will take fewer than 30 seconds to complete and help us provide useful content like the one you saw today to you in the future. Thank you all for joining us for this final episode of the African Resource Mobilization webinar series, and we hope we can see you again in the near future.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so I'm going to just go through some of the questions that were sent to me so we can just add, this is kind of like that bonus material, I guess is what you could call it. Gerald, let's go ahead and see. Okay, this is from Anthony Mbandi. Do you feel that without DRK, you can grow into the future? How do you build your own local capacity to fund local projects and needs?
Yes, the reason the DRK came on board is to ensure that the organization, Barefoot Law, grows a lot further or goes a lot beyond the support that they've given us. So the preparation that we've been working on with them for the past 3 years is primarily designed for the long-term survival, growth, scale, and impact of the organization. And I'm confident, I'm very confident Barefoot Law will grow and thrive. And the relationship with the DRK, what has ended is the active portfolio support, but we are continuing as an alumni and that goes on for a long time. So anytime we feel we need any further guidance, the DRK is always ready and willing to help. So I'm very confident. That's what we've been building towards.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Fantastic. So Rosemary Mutunke from Kenya has another question. She says, we learned more from failing forward. Please share one or two areas or interventions that have not worked.
Personally, as an individual, I don't know how many organizations, about 6 or 7 that failed before BarefootLaw succeeded. So that's a story for another day. Yeah. You'll find some of them on one of those stories is on YouTube about an organization.
YouTube.
On YouTube. It was at one of the pitching competitions. So I was trying to share some of that background. The SMS intervention we designed did not work. We had to go back, shut it down for a few years and restart it. Winnie that you're seeing has been an idea since 2014. So many iterations didn't work. So it's about failing, but learning how to fail and accepting to unlearn and relearn. So the deception is many times we only see the successes. And that's because of the failures we keep to ourselves. But trust me, by the time you see one success, there are so many failures. So I just want to encourage her to embrace that, because that's where the real growth is.
Right. I mean, I love what you said, because I was once on a panel with actually he's a VC in Silicon Valley, the first African VC. And he said, you know, you see me today and everyone thinks I'm so, you know, this is wonderful. And I was an overnight success. He's like, I was an overnight success 20 years in the making. Right. So there's a lot that it takes to get to that point. So I always remember that. And you just made me think of that. Okay. We've got another question for you, Gerald, which is about, okay, let me just find it. It's from Haron Ngoge. Are social enterprises sustainable economically? Or in other words, in what ways are social enterprises economically sustainable? I guess as compared to regular nonprofits.
I guess it depends on the innovativeness of those that are down in a sector. So I think part of the innovation is going to be in the approach. Part of the innovation is going to be in sustainability. Part of the innovation is going to be in management. So as you're looking or thinking about your social enterprise, think of innovation, not only, a lot of times we spend so much time on innovating in the service delivery or in the model that we forget to innovate in other ways. I'm sure there is a sustainability aspect in every venture. You just need to discover it. And I can't answer specifically that question by sector. Only you who is in a sector will figure out how best to find a sustainability model to what you're doing. It may not come immediately.
Yeah.
And I request that you don't have that at the beginning of your venture. I mean, some of the biggest tech enterprises or non-tech enterprises are still trying to figure out how to generate revenues from the services that they offer. But eventually it comes, and it comes in a big way.
Right.
So start by perfecting the model as well, and it will come.
Absolutely. I love that. Okay, this is an interesting one from Samuel Thury, I think. Yeah, Thury. How do you address founders' lack of ambition, growing beyond their ideas they started with, when they attain comfort from traditional funders? So I guess it's like, how do you get out of the box?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to the personality. Like I said, you could invest in there's the horse and there's the horse rider. Both are necessary for success. A number of times we get, like Bill mentioned in his presentation, we get a number of funders who are only interested in investing in the horse, ignoring the horse rider. And because all the food is given to the horse, there is no ambition for the horse rider to try and also improve. There is no challenge. There's that thought of, as long as the horse is healthy, we will win the race.
Right.
And that's the problem with a lot of our traditional funding. It's funding that the day it's cut off, the organization shuts down. So for founders, you need to challenge yourselves, push yourselves forward. One trick I found out is to get a board that is forward-looking. Mm-hmm. So put in place a board that is forward-looking, and these guys will, I wouldn't use whoop your ass, but these guys will always try and push you forward.
That's a technical term for everyone.
It's a technical term. It's a legal term with a legal definition.
Yes.
But always get guys who are ready to push you forward and avoid stagnation. A rolling stone gathers no moss.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. This is from Danny Gota. My organization has tried for the last 2 years, but been unfortunate. What advice can a startup in Africa, what advice do you have for a startup in Africa to increase its chance for being considered? It seems it's kind of similar to Rosemary's kind of question, I think, earlier, but if you could just, I think it sounds like Bill sort of covered some of those things, but
yes,
your opinion.
Yes, he did. For me, primarily, you need to learn to communicate. There are so many amazing things happening on the continent, but I would probably relate it to the education system. We are not taught to communicate well. And so those that know how to communicate well take all the opportunities.
Yes.
So for me, just learn to communicate, learn to tell your story, and learn to share it widely. The universe responds to the energies you send, and that comes with communication. And 2 years.
Give you a finger snap for that. Yeah.
And 2 years is such a short time. I remember BarefootLaw 2 years hardly had probably about $1,000 in our account. So we're all working to get things running. So give it a bit of time. And put in 10,000 hours. I mean, God also did create the world in a day. It took about 7 days. And this is God.
Yeah. It's resilience. Right? You have to be resilient. You have to be very resilient, because you hear a lot more no's than you say yeses, but it's that one yes, right?
Exactly.
And that's really important. That makes the difference. And the other thing is that so many people, and I remember reading this in Napoleon Hill's How to Think and Grow Rich. The title's misleading, but he says most people stop three feet short of success, and there's a whole story behind it. But the point is, a lot of times we give up right before that thing just kind of kicks off, right? Like how you're saying you got disappointing news before you won the prize for KBF. Imagine if you'd stopped them, what you wouldn't have been able to experience.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks for bringing that up. Resilience. Resilience is key.
Absolutely. Okay. We've got Danny Gota, who says, we already said that. Okay, this is from Chiari, who asks, how can an organization get in training, capacity building to develop and improve interventions? For instance, how does BarefootLaw continue to build its own capacity and stay on top of staff training?
Primarily, we search for knowledge. We put the quest for knowledge beyond everything else in this organization. So we encourage staff to fail, because in failing, experiments fail, do things failing. But because of that, we end up learning. And when we learn, or when we see whatever is lacking, we come up with a structured way in which we can come up with, call it a syllabus, to overcome that. A number of times I notice organizations or companies end up placing the quest for funding a lot beyond so many other things. But try and place the quest for knowledge. You will be surprised at what results you'll achieve. Funding will come as a byproduct of the quest for knowledge.
Yeah, I agree. The way what you talked about encouraging employees to experiment, that's really how Google does it, right? And I want to segue, before I give you the final question, I want to segue to when you talked about to Google and going to San Francisco and going to the UK and having all the challenges getting through the border customs and what is it, the border security or whatever they are, because people couldn't understand how an African was coming to talk about AI and all these different things. I think it's so important for you to talk about that, because I listened to that, my jaw dropped, because I said that would have been the time a lot of people would have quit. Right. So I think people need to know, like, literally what you have endured to get to here, to this point.
Yeah. And I guess there are two things there. One is, as Africans, we need to look at solutions that are beyond the continent, solutions that are going to change the world. So you should place your ambitions. At least I always encourage those, especially that are younger than me. Your ambition should not be being the best lawyer in Africa. It should be to be the best lawyer in the world from Africa. So the world has something to learn, and especially now with the free flow of information. The challenge is, because of where we come from, the number of challenges on the world scale, on the world circuit, that we're not trained how to deal with. Just yesterday, I think passport something index was released.
Yeah.
Power of passports. To get, for instance, me traveling to Cote d'Ivoire, I probably need to go to Nairobi to get a visa. Right. I don't know if that has changed. And now imagine how difficult it must be to travel across the world. About 1 or 2 years ago, there was a huge AI conference in Canada. And so many of the participants from Africa were rejected visas, so they could not attend. So some of these things are what we need to challenge. I think when you mentioned resilience, you captured it a bit. You find that once we are faced with this, we sort of withdraw to our comfort zone, and we do not sort of try and push. I remember when we were going to launch Winnie in the UK, the guys at the airport had to verify that indeed an African was coming to launch a system as complicated like this in London.
Yeah.
So I mean, I could have given up, but
I could see how deflating that would be for some. I mean, it's beyond, you know.
Yeah, it's beyond. But also, there is this pressure, and it's probably something. But again, it's probably something for another day. The threshold for us as Africans usually is so high, and I've seen this again happening in. Be it conferences, for you to get a seat at the table, you have to be so exceptional. I mean, not all of us are Kofi Annan, right? But the world is sort of looking
or Gerald Abila.
No, I'm polite. But, you know, so that to me is one of the greatest injustices on the world scale that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
We sometimes have to prove ourselves a lot harder for us to
not sometimes, always
in most cases. So I think that's something that only us we can try, but the next generation should really try and push the threshold. And that's why I'm encouraging us, especially those from Africa. The world should be your play field. Don't limit your thinking to Africa. And yet technology has made the pursuit of knowledge so decentralized.
Look at this.
If I want to make
look at
this.
I
mean, look at this. It's I'm seeing the number of attendees, and jaw dropped.
Yeah.
I don't know where all these guys registering for this. We're sharing knowledge. Take advantage of it. And that's, I think, the benefit of the lockdown as well.
Yeah.
We've all come to a platform, or we've all come to a world in which what is limiting us is our human creativity and ingenuity. Courses are now free online.
Yep.
Take advantage of that. And trust me, the flow of knowledge from the global south to the global north, it's just the beginning.
I agree 100%. And there's so much growth, right? And I mean, in many markets, anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Let me not go there. Let me go back to the question, the final question that was sent to me. So it says, this is from Samuel Obara. Could you comment on leadership, succession planning, and social enterprise growth? That's our closing question.
Yeah, there's a 100% chance that we're all going to die.
Yeah.
At some point. There's a 100, the future is not guaranteed to anyone.
Especially not during a pandemic.
not during a pandemic. A lot of times at least myself coming from my legal background and looking at a lot of writing of wills, I get to understand and appreciate what continuity planning does. Working with the DRK as well, we've tried to put in place systems and structures that will enable the organization to go beyond me. But there's so much material on this online, you can find it.
Yeah.
What I just like to caution is you as an entrepreneur, you as a founder, you as a leader of the organization, let the systems develop. A lot of times our ego or our personalities trying to be the alpha or the omega in the organization, you reach a point, like honestly, right now, BarefootLaw has reached a point where in the beginning, I was doing almost everything. I was even the finance controller. But right now, I can't lie to you, the knowledge I have as an individual is not enough to get this organization to where I think it can be. And that means you as a leader needs to change your role from being everything to being a leader. And that includes stepping aside, creating systems that will enable your organization prosper should you be knocked by a truck the day you're leaving office.
Wow.
So please plan for it. And it only comes with having structures in place. Structures and a strong board.
Yeah.
Set up a strong board. That's very helpful.
Okay, that's great. Is there one kind of nugget that you want to leave us with? Because you're the last speaker. You're the last person standing.
You've caught me off guard, but I just want to send out an encouragement to everyone who is here, an appreciation for you joining us, but also to encourage you not to give up. I know things can be really tight. I'm African born, I'm African grown, I've never lived anywhere else. And yet here I am trying to create a change globally. It's tough, but the future belongs to those that are resilient. So for any entrepreneurs here, be open-minded, search for knowledge, be resilient, and trust me, the world will be your playfield.
Okay, that was great. I love it. Okay, thank you, everybody, and be safe. Be healthy and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And I think that's it. It's a wrap.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Gerald, we'll be in touch.
We'll be in touch. Bye.
Thanks.